I literally came down to Vancouver from a farm. I had no experience whatsoever in the recording studio. I didn't even know there was multi-track tape. I wasn't aware that you could solo the individual instruments in the band. Well, am I ever excited for today's session? Totally inspired by an awesome comment and suggestion left by Dan on a recent session I posted called Respect the House. Well, listen to what Dan shares. You did a video called Getting Fired about 6 months ago, and it made me think a Getting Hired video would be great. I would love to hear your experience and advice for new and aspiring producer engineers like myself who are trying to establish themselves and make a living as audio professionals. Dan, that is an awesome suggestion, my friend. Thank you so much for engaging on the channel. This has to be a really common question for a lot of people, right? How do I break into the music business? How do I get my foot in the door so that maybe I could actually make a living from this industry? Well, I believe the most effective way for me to answer that is to go ahead and share some of my own experience, and particularly my very first job in a real studio and how that came about. Okay, so we're gonna have to roll the clock back a little. I'm talking all the way back to summer of 1984 when I had just graduated high school and made my way down to the big city of Vancouver. Now, probably just like many of you, I remember sitting down with my high school counselor, my career counselor, in the final months of grade 12, right, in the spring of 1984. And I remember talking about my career paths and what I might do. That awesome counselor suggested to me that I check out radio, just based on the sound of my voice. That was the only reason that they suggested that. And am I ever thankful that counselor suggested that day, because it just opened my mind, right? Up until that point, I think I was going to be a rancher. Literally, I was just going to follow in my family's footsteps. But because of that one little suggestion, it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I couldn't wait. The day after I graduated high school, I booked it for Vancouver to pursue my new career in radio. Well, to make a long story a little bit shorter, a few weeks later, I had the opportunity to sit in on a full-blown recording session at Little Mountain Sound. This studio back in 1984 was rocking. This place was absolutely happening and the place to be. So as a kid barely out of high school, completely naive, there I was sitting in on a real recording session that was going on at one of the most famous recording studios on the West Coast. Oh man, I walked out of the session that day and I absolutely knew without a shadow of a doubt that was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. No question I was going to be a recording engineer. Well, how am I going to get that accomplished? I mean, I'm a high school kid coming off a farm in some little town up in the interior of BC. How in the world am I going to break into the music business? Well, so I came to the conclusion quite early that I was going to have to educate myself. There's no way I'm just going to walk in off the farm and into the recording studio and have any kind of shot at it. So I got busy looking at options. And oh man, back in 1984, there weren't very many options for recording schools. In fact, in Canada, there was only one. It was called the Trebas Institute of Recording Arts, and it was back in Montreal. Well, you can imagine how excited I got when I heard that Trebas was opening a brand new facility right in Vancouver that fall. So during the remainder of that summer, I enrolled and was accepted into the Trebas 2-year engineering program. And I think the tuition for that school was like 10 grand a year, which back in 1984, that was a lot of money, particularly for a student that hadn't shown a lot of initiative in the past, right? Up till that point. Oh man, I had barely made it through high school. I put in kind of the minimum effort, just enough to sort of pass. So yeah, the decision that my folks made to help me out with that tuition came with some resistance, no question, just based on my own track record. I had literally not shown any initiative in school whatsoever. Well, I'm so proud to say that when my folks came to my graduation, when I finished my 2-year program at Trebas, they came to that graduation and learned that not only did I not miss one single class in 2 years, I wasn't even late to a class. And isn't this exactly how it works? As soon as we find something that we're passionate about, oh man, you can't even turn it off. There's like never going to be enough gain of information or enough classes or enough schools or enough YouTube videos, whatever it is. Once you finally make a decision on what it is you want to do, you just turn into a machine trying to just soak up as much information as you can. Well, one awesome thing that I remember from my experience at Trebas was during the second year when all of the students were involved in building a little recording studio, a little tiny facility in one of the offices that we had. Well, the main purpose of this little studio was to provide a place for the students to come in and work on their projects, as well as maybe do a little extracurricular stuff. Well, so my 2-year engineering program wraps up in June of 1986. I knew none of the classes were going to be back in until the fall, so the administration part of the office was still going to be open. So I just didn't go away. I literally just kept coming in and working in that studio every single day. My attitude was like, until someone kicks me out, I'm just going to stay busy in here and learn whatever I can and work this little studio. Well, it didn't take very long for the administration to figure out that there's no reason that this awesome little facility that we built needs to be vacant for the whole summer just because there are no students around the school. There's all kinds of alumni and all kinds of people that could use that space. So boom, they hired me. They gave me a job to manage this little studio. You know, I've often said that 95% of this thing is just showing up. And that's a great example where Trebas had no idea that they were going to be looking for someone to fill a position. And when they finally decided to fill that position, I was just there. They didn't really have to look anywhere because I never left. I just showed up. Well, the real opportunity for this gig at Trebas wouldn't show up for me for another 12 months when one of the gigs and the alumni engineers that I booked to come through the facility, they invited a legit engineer, someone from a really well-known studio in Vancouver. Well, this alumni student invited this engineer to come and help them on that particular session. Yeah, I'll never forget this night. It was after dinner, probably 7 o'clock on a weeknight. I'm just working on the schedule of our little studio. And the engineer that was invited to come in on that session found me in my little office and he introduced himself. Well, I immediately invited him to sit down and we proceeded to have one of the best conversations. Just one of those awesome times in life that, you know, you meet someone, you got all kinds of things in common and you just hit it off. Oh yeah, we had an amazing conversation. And at the end of what must have been a couple of hours of sitting there chatting, he got up and said, you know, we're looking for a new assistant engineer at Mushroom Studios. Why don't you get your resume together and come on down and see us? Well, you can imagine how I felt at that exact moment. I literally flew home that night. I think I rode my bicycle on the clouds. Well, of course, I followed up on that opportunity, and I was so fortunate to land that job. Man, that changed the direction of my entire career. You know, is it pure luck that I landed that job at Mushroom because I met that engineer working at Trebas that night? Yeah, I don't think so. I think there were a lot of little events leading up to a particular point. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people just go off about these recording schools, about how much of a ripoff they are, even some of my closest colleagues. You know, back in 1984, when I made the decision to go to recording school, there was one choice. It was very easy. Today, oh man, there's got to be 50 or if not 100 different recording schools and programs out there. And there's no question, some of those are going to be run by opportunists and maybe people looking for nothing more than a path to get to government funds. But I promise you, there's going to be some killer programs out there. You know, I should probably be the biggest skeptic in the book with 30 plus years in this business looking into some of these schools. But man, there was a program that a colleague of mine just finished to get their master's, and I was blown away at this program. The amount of real one-on-one quality mentorship that my friend received through this program was just outrageous. I sort of couldn't believe some of the instruction and the encouragement and the knowledge that was being shared by some of these mentors. So I know there's some killer schools out there, but it's going to require work and effort to sort of sort them out and find out which ones actually have value, right? Well, because of that awesome experience that I had at Trebas, it was years later that I found myself in a position to hire a brand new full-time assistant engineer at one of the corporate studios that I worked at. And it couldn't have been a simpler process. I literally reached out to all of the recording schools in Vancouver. Yeah, when it was suddenly my responsibility to find a new assistant engineer, I personally got on the phone with the administration in every single recording school in Vancouver, and I asked for their 2 top engineering students. I think I interviewed 23 different students for that position. Well, one of those students totally identified themselves for that position, and it happened just like that in that interview. I gave the same spiel to every one of those students, letting them know that when it was pretty much time to wrap up the interview that, we're really busy. We got a studio that's being built. We got this going on. We got that going on. I'm so happy you came in and talked to me today. I'll be getting back to you in the next few days and letting you know what our decision is. Every single student was like, thank you so much for your time. That sounds great. Except one student. I go through that spiel and he looks at me and he says, well, I'm not that good with a soldering iron, but I know how to use it. Can I help? There you go. So after interviewing 23 different students, it was just crystal clear to me who was going to fill that position. And as it turns out, that individual went on to have an incredible career with that company. My secret weapon, my entire career, has been show up and have a killer attitude working for all the best engineer producers out there and just turn into a sponge. Oh yeah, Dan, there are so many different positions that we can fill out there with our professional audio skills. And sometimes we got to look outside the box a little bit. Even if our goal is to be recording engineer at X studio or something, that's awesome, but it might be some other path that leads you to that position. And I just encourage you to keep open-minded to all those paths. That little job that I had at Trebas for that 1 year, I don't know if there's a better way I could have spent that first year out of college, but I look back on my career today and I wouldn't change a single thing. That year that I spent managing that little facility was exactly where I needed to be to put myself in a position to be ready to step up to the plate when that engineer from Mushroom rolled in. Well, Dan, I sincerely hope you're inspired by me sharing a little bit of my own personal story and knowing that, oh man, if I can come from a little farm in the middle of nowhere, riding horses and milking cows, to going into the studio and assisting some of the most unbelievably good engineers on earth. If I can do that, you can do that. I promise you. Thank you so much for sitting in on today's session.